everybody. You are listening to Feed Your Mind. Today we will discuss the height of the dome firmament explained in detail. And so our research begins with the Van Allen radiation belt. The Van Allen radiation belt is said to be a band of deadly radioactivity from the sun that surrounds the Earth. And it's the main reason why the moon landings never happened, because there's no way that astronauts were able to make it through these Van Allen radiation belts without getting cooked like a microwave. And so this Van Allen radiation belt is said to begin at 620 miles up and extends all the way to 3,700 miles up. And then there's a coincidence with the 620 miles up, because that's actually the height of the ionosphere as well. The ionosphere is said to be about 620 miles up as well, and it is described as a shell of electrons and electrically charged atoms and molecules that surround the Earth. That sounds very similar to the Van Allen radiation belt. And so are these the same things, just two different names, possibly? The ionosphere and the Van Allen belt being the height of the dome firmament? Because an interesting thing about this ionosphere description is it says a shell of electrons. A shell to me sounds like a solid object, a firm and solid object. And so I have an interesting video coming up about satellites and how they interact with the ionosphere in order to bounce signals back to Earth. And so make sure you click your notification bell because you won't want to miss it. I will be giving a sneak peek out to my patrons pretty soon with the title and artwork. And you can join my Patreon for as little as $1. The link is in the description box. And I've also covered this ionosphere in my video about Operation Fishbowl. And that video is already up, so you can check that out as well. Because the thing is, the scientists are literally saying that they're bouncing signals off of the sky. Now, their excuse is saying it's a shell of electrically charged particles, but this seems to be their excuse and their only way to describe what they are witnessing. Because if you think about it with common sense, the air is supposed to be thinner the farther you go up. And so how are they possibly bouncing signals off of the sky? You see, satellites do not exist. They're just bouncing signals off this reflective dome firmament. The reflective properties of the dome firmament is part of the reason why you see rainbows, sundogs, and more. Because according to my research, the dome is most likely some form of reflective material. There's descriptions that say it's as a molten glass. Molten sounds kind of metallic, and it could be a reflective metallic type glass. It sounds like it's probably see-through as well. And so this material doesn't seem like it's known to mankind. But there's also another striking coincidence of this ionosphere, because they say it begins 31 miles up. And so 31 miles up is actually the same height of the highest balloon that has ever been launched. You see, balloons will always pop around 30 miles up or lower. And this is allegedly due to the low air pressure that forces the balloon to expand until it bursts. And so scientists have been creating these balloons to be more flexible so they don't burst. And so that's basically what a weather balloon is. But from what I'm hearing, they always pop anyways. So what is causing these balloons to pop at 32 miles up? And what's with the coincidence with 32 miles being the lowest part of the ionosphere? And so like I said, the ionosphere ranges from 31 miles up to 620 miles up. So if it begins at 31 miles up, that could possibly be the lowest point of the dome firmament. Now, the reason why I believe they're saying these are ranging from 31 miles up to 620 miles up is because the curved nature of the dome. You see, if the dome is an arch-like shape, there would be various points of height on the domes. And so I suppose the lowest points would be around 31 miles up. But that seems to be the average point where balloons pop no matter where you are. And so let me know what you guys think about all of this in the comment section. Most balloons usually only range from 11 to 23 miles up, so this 32 miles up was an exception, and this happened around 2002. And so polar orbiting satellites are said to be as low as 444 miles up. The ISS is said to be about 220 miles up. Low Earth orbit is said to begin around 100 miles up and is said to range to about 1,200 miles up. And so I'm rejecting the 1,200 miles up scenario because there doesn't seem to be any evidence of anything being more than 30 miles up. Outer space is said to actually begin at 50 miles up. So if space doesn't exist, that means the dome could be under 50 miles up, especially in some areas. And so to summarize this video with all this information I presented, it appears there's no proof that anything has ever went more than 30 miles up. 32.9 miles precisely seems to be the record of anything that has ever launched. And so that's basically 33 miles up. And so what do you all think? Do you think the dome is 32 miles up, or is it just in some places 32 miles up? Or are you going to go for the 620 miles up hypothesis, where the Van Allen belt begins and the ionosphere ends? Or I suppose it could be somewhere in between as well. And so I suppose I'm going to lean more towards the dome being somewhere around 50 to 100 miles up. And maybe 100 to 600 miles up could be the second heaven area, possibly. Who knows? Because maybe that's the area where the stars and the planets, which are actually stars as well, hang out. In my last video, I discussed how planets are actually stars. So make sure to check that video out if you get a chance. And so the second heaven area seems to be around the range where scientists are saying the orbit begins, with the ISS being 220 miles up. So I'll also be covering the ISS in a later video as well. I'll basically be redoing my video about the ISS with commentary this time. It's about time for an update on that video because I had to remove the audio from that video due to some copyright issues. So I plan on redoing the ISS Seen from Earth video. And so click your notification bells and stay tuned for that. And then I really want to know what you all think about this information presented in this video. It doesn't seem like anything is permitted more than around 35 miles up, but that doesn't necessarily mean the dome begins there. If there's that second heaven area, the dome could actually extend up to about 6